Buenas tardes, everyone. It's nice to be here with you again. And today we're going to, Antonella, could we just start by showing the cover slide?
Sure. There we go.
So today we have a very interesting and super important subject for us in our seminar. This is the subject of sustainability in government procurement. And this is something that we're all hearing about. We all, at some level, I think, believe in. We believe that we know that there are some crises in the world, crises of environmental sustainability, climate change. These are things that we're all concerned about. And yet, I think we also have many questions. How does public procurement fit in with helping us to resolve these crises? And what are some practical steps? What is the theoretical basis for this, and what are the practical steps to help us move forward in this area? So these are the questions that we will explore in this seminar. Next slide, please. And may I just say, of course, I'm delighted to be back with INTAL and with our colleague Veronica, and with my excellent co-presenter, Antonella Salguero. So here's the contents of this presentation. And this will be yes.
Before you start your presentation, I would like to give a message to the attendees.
Certainly.
It would be highly interesting for the participants not to feel lonely, and to make the presentation and to make this meeting more dynamic. So please make questions and open your cameras. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to raise your electronic hand or to post your comment or question on the chat screen. So do not hesitate. Open the camera, raise your hand, and make your questions. So we are looking forward to having a look at all of you on the screen. Go on, Rob.
So thank you for that, Veronica. Indeed,
muchísimas gracias, Verónica. Sí, en realidad.
Indeed, it actually helps us as presenters if we can see as many of the participants as possible. So I'm grateful to you for making this request. And indeed, our goal is to be helpful to everyone and stimulate a conversation. So I really hope people will feel free to ask questions at any time. Okay, so in this presentation then, I'm going to begin by talking about what I call the two dimensions of sustainability, because sustainability nowadays it's very much about environmental values and protecting the environment and helping to deal with climate change, but it's not only about those things. It's also has some social dimensions. Protecting human rights, looking after the interests of workers, things like this. So we're going to separate these two, and we will talk about both of these. Probably we'll spend more time on the environmental aspect of sustainability in this seminar, and yet the other aspect is important as well. And then secondly, we'll walk you through a step-by-step guide that Antonella and I have developed to help countries in implementing green public procurement policies. Then we come again to the social aspects of sustainability. And towards the end of our presentation, we will talk about the international dimension of these issues. Because you know, most of us think normally, principally, about how we address these issues in our own country. But it's actually helpful to us and encouraging to us, I hope, to know that around the world, people are thinking about these issues. And they're actually taking steps to work together on some of these issues. And even though this, of course, is not a substitute for the work that we have to do in our own countries. I know that. And yet it can be a help, and it can be reassuring, and it can make our policies more effective when we coordinate with other countries as well. So this will be a part of the discussion as well. And we'll end with some key takeaways for government procurement officials, such as yourselves. And this is something that we believe in very strongly. In the end, it all comes down to the people who are involved in government procurement. That's yourselves. And you have a hard job to do. And we believe that your job should be recognized as, as a professional responsibility with many dimensions to it. And we believe that you should be properly supported in your work. And this seminar is a very small part of the support that you need. In other words, you should be supported. You should receive adequate remuneration. You should be supported by your managers and your political leaders. We believe in all of these things. And you should be supported also with technical assistance and training to be fully aware of different issues and different possibilities that are out there. So next slide, please, Antonella. And the next one. Okay, so again, this is just to remind you, and we will go into a lot more depth on both of these, but throughout, when I say sustainable public procurement, throughout this presentation, and my colleague Antonella, we'll have in mind these two dimensions. The first dimension does concern environmental, the protection of natural resources, the protection of the environment, and the mitigation and adjustment to climate change. This all comes under this general term of green public procurement. But the other aspect is increasingly important as well, and that is because we want to live in a world that is environmentally sustainable, but we also all want to have societies that are socially sustainable and that properly protect all citizens and look after the rights of labor, look after human rights. These are the considerations that come in the area of socially responsible public procurement. So when we put these two together, green public procurement and socially responsible public procurement, this gives us what we refer to as sustainable public procurement. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is just to remind you all that these actually, I think I need the previous one if I could. Yeah. So this is just to point out that both of these aspects of sustainability are recognized in what we refer to as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And Antonella, were you going to elaborate on this slide? Excuse me. So over to you then. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, especially to those who have turned on their cameras. Luz Maria, hello, Daniela. Those who dare to turn on rather, your camera. So I encourage the others to do so we can see your faces and to see if you're interested in these topics or if you want to learn more. And we encourage you to ask questions. As Rob said, the SDGs address public procurement. If we speak about sustainability, we can't leave SDGs aside. The goal 12, that is to guarantee modes of sustainable consumption and production in 12.7, is about promoting public procurement practices that are sustainable in accordance with national or domestic priorities and policies. There's focus on sustainability in terms of environmental criteria. But this also encompasses social criteria to be included in these goals or targets. In other SDGs, even though public procurement is not expressly mentioned, they are indirectly mentioned through targets that can be achieved through public procurement. The use of energy and infrastructure through clean energies and renewable energies, resilient structures or infrastructures, access to health services. So we need to go through a public procurement process first to acquire medication, equipment. We also have the effective participation of women in economic activities. This can also be achieved through public procurement in order to promote a multilateral framework to develop trade, having in mind these criteria that I just mentioned. To do what? To promote sustainable development and integrating developing countries in global value chains. Having said this, I give the floor to Rob to start dealing with the first topic. Rob, you're in charge of GPP.
Thank you very much, Antonella. So you can go ahead to the next one now. So this is, so the focus, our focus now is on the environmental aspect of sustainability. And here, I mean, I want to make 3 or 4 essential points. One is, I think we all know that a climate catastrophe is looming. I'm personally speaking to you now from my home in Florida, and Florida is becoming hotter every year. And I collaborate with Antonella, who lives in Paraguay, and she tells me that it should be the winter now, but in fact, it's really more like the spring. So summer. So this is, and this, you know, we have more hurricanes now, we have more cyclones, we have more forest fires, we have heat waves in many different parts of the world and flooding. So this really is, without trying to be a scientist, which I'm not, I think we have to acknowledge that this crisis is real. So this is point number 1. And point number 2 would be that public procurement, you know, has an essential role in supporting the struggle for sustainability and the transition to greener energy and technologies. And why is that? Why is it up to public procurement? Well, first of all, of course, it's not only up to public procurement. All individuals can play a role in the working towards sustainability. Farmers, manufacturers, all of us have a role to play. But public procurement has a special power because public procurement is such an important part of our economies. Remember, we discussed in the first session, this is approximately 15% of our entire GDP is constituted by public procurement, and sometimes it is more in particular countries. And so what that means is that the government, through its purchasing decisions, has the capability to push the economy in certain directions. And this is especially the reason why public procurement is so important in promoting the use of green energy and other green technologies. So this is because of the purchasing power of government, and also the ability of government to embrace specific goals. When the government makes a commitment to embrace green values, to check on sustainability criteria in its public purchasing, this has the effect of pushing the economy, the whole economy, in that direction. So, and then the third point would be that national administrations in all our countries are increasingly aware of these issues. I'm not saying they are yet fully coming to grips with these issues, but all around the world, actually, different countries, different governments are adopting GPP policies and action plans. And so this is an encouraging thing, and we can learn from the policies that are being implemented in different countries. The fourth point would be that international agreements can play a role. And at a bare minimum, so Antonella and I have worked previously for the World Trade Organization, and we especially care about something called the WTO Agreement on Government Procurement. We will talk some more about this later. But we also know, many countries, including countries from the Andean region, participate in bilateral or regional trade agreements. And these international agreements can be an important tool for helping the participating countries to move in the direction of sustainable public procurement. So we believe in this strongly. At a bare minimum, international agreements must not stand in the way of the necessary initiatives. And hopefully they will actually promote and encourage participating countries to reorient their procurement policies to sustainability. And so these are the basic considerations that are driving our kind of embrace of sustainable public procurement. Next slide, please, Antonella. Okay, so here's a quote from actually a friend of ours, of Antonella's and mine, that we often work with, Professor Stephen Schooner. I actually believe, Veronica, you recall Steve Schooner from our past seminars as well. And he's a particular authority on sustainability in public procurement in the United States. And he has just a long quote here. I'm certainly not going to read it all out, but the purpose of this quotation, again, is to reinforce this point that in a way that procurement professionals, or acquisition professionals, as Steve likes to call them, people like yourselves, have a vital role to play in this area. And it's not enough, we can implement government policies and give speeches and make bold statements. That has its role and its place. But ultimately, we need people such as yourselves to apply your knowledge and your public service ethic to push and help your governments move in the direction of climate change mitigation and environmental conservation. This is Steve's point. This is also very much Antonella's and my belief in presenting this seminar and in the work that we do internationally. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have here, and this is kind of an introductory page. We have developed this, Antonella and I have developed this 7-step process for implementing sustainability at the national level in public procurement. And this is, it's not intended to be a rigid process. You might decide, sometimes, not all countries follow all the 7 steps, although we believe it is useful to follow these 7 steps and to follow this process methodically. And step 1 is assessment of existing conditions and constraints regarding the implementation of GPP. For example, it might be that in your legislation, there's an overwhelming emphasis on lowest price. This would be a constraint that makes it more difficult to implement GPP. GPP is green public procurement. There might be a lack of access to green technologies in your economy. That would be a condition or a constraint that you need to be aware of. The second step is to develop a roadmap to the national GPP strategy. It all helps us all when we have in mind an overall plan. That's what the roadmap is. And Antonella and I will elaborate on this. Step 3 involves stakeholder consultations. This is very, very important. In government, as we know, it doesn't work if we just go ahead in a single direction all by ourselves. Really, we have to talk to our stakeholders and bring everyone along together. It's hard work sometimes, but this is how effective policies are put into place. Then we're going to have training and institution building. This is very important. Integrating the national green public procurement strategy into the procurement process at the level of individual procurements. That's, a crucial step. And then mainstreaming GPP into international trade agreements and related initiatives. And finally, monitoring and measuring the progress of the National Green Public Procurement Strategy, and going back and reflecting and revisiting it where appropriate. So this is just a sort of overview of this process. We're now going to elaborate on the different steps involved. Next slide, please.
Gracias, Rob. Te tomo la palabra para continuar y hablar sobre los primeros 2 pasos.
Thank you. Now it's my turn. I'm going to speak about the first 2 steps. I'm going to say that this tool doesn't have to be applied from 1 to 7 in that order. You can, for example, implement one of the steps, the strategy for green purchase procurement, and made consultations with the stakeholders, you may modify or amend the strategy. So you go back to step 2. This means we have to be flexible because this is something new. And even for public procurement, we have to see whether there are new materials. If we take, for example, social procurement, there are many things that can be introduced. That means that things may have to be revisited. Now, the next step is conditions and constraints impacting in the implementation of GPP in a given market. Before going into the details, I would like to say that in most of the regulations and jurisdictions, the environmental conditions and the application of sustainability criteria are not mandatory. In most of the jurisdictions, they are optional and usually in the guise of commitments the authorities assume in order to implement them through the different agencies. Nonetheless, there are some examples in which the regulation has as mandatory the eligibility criteria. One of the countries which uses this positive approach is Japan. As we are speaking in the Andean community, let me give you the example of Ecuador. You may correct me, my friends from Ecuador, but in the 2008 constitutions, you see that the green procurement is enshrined within the chapter of public procurement. And there is a chapter which says that the state will promote in the public sector and the private sector the use of
y de fuentes alternativas de energía no
clean
contaminantes en
environmental
espacios urbanos,
technologies
lo que hace
and
esta provisión
implement
básicamente
low impact
autorizar
policies
que en
or
las compras
technologies.
públicas o en las compras que hace el Estado, estos criterios de
So
sostenibilidad
public
puedan ser
procurement made by the
integrados de manera
state
expresa y sin muchos obstáculos. Otro
have to
ejemplo también
be
lo tenemos en Uruguay
mainstreamed
con la ley de eficiencia
without difficulties.
energética
There is another
que exige a los
example in
compradores que
Uruguay
consideren
with
los costos del
energy
ciclo de vida
efficiency,
de
whereby
las adquisiciones
the
relevantes,
purchases have to
como por
take into
ejemplo considerar
account
no
the
solamente el precio
life
fijado del compra
cycle.
operativo
That
que
is to
se quiere
say,
mantener,
not
la
only
gestión
price
y
has
los
to be borne in
operativos y la
mind,
eliminación
the costs
del
of
producto
maintenance,
una vez que haya
the
terminado su vida
disposal of the
útil, por
product
ejemplo, en
once
el área
the
o
useful
en el sector
life
de las
is
energías.
over. That
Y bueno, no estamos
appears
diciendo que
in the
siempre debe
energy
hacerse,
sector
que
in
estos criterios
Uruguay.
deben estar en las leyes de forma autorizante o de
So
forma
not
expresa.
always all
Y
these
esto es justamente
criteria
la
appear
parte
in
donde
black
la
and white
intervención del
in
gobierno y de las
legislation. That is
autoridades.
something which
No
is at the
obstante, lo que queremos hacer
discretion
con esta
of the
guía es un
different
espacio en
administrations.
promover
But with the
la
7
promoción y la
steps you can see
integración de las
on the
compras
slide, you
verdes
can
y las
see
compras sostenibles
how you can
sociales
promote
a
and
fin de
sustain
poder incluirlas estas
green
sin
public
tener muchos
procurement,
obstáculos
GPP,
legales para la inclusión de los mismos.
without having to
Y bueno,
overcome
como
many
dije, vamos
legal
por el primer paso,
obstacles.
que
So
sería
let's see the
hacer un
first
mapeo de las
one,
condiciones del
which is
mercado antes de
mapping the
iniciar o definir una
regulatory
estrategia.
PP
Tenemos que
frameworks.
saber
Before
qué hay en el mercado,
plunging into the
si la
strategies,
ley
we have to
que
see
tenemos
what
vigente
is
no
in the
contiene
market.
obstáculos para
So,
la compra.
so as
Por
to see
ejemplo, si
what
la ley solamente
hurdles
dice que las compras
exist in
deben
the market. For
hacerse
example, if the
o la
legislative
evaluación de
law
las compras
says that
solamente deben
the
hacerse
evaluation
teniendo
of
en cuenta el precio más
procurement have to
bajo, ahí ya
be
tenemos un primer
done
obstáculo,
considering the
porque
lowest price,
al
that's the
considerar
first
compras
obstacle.
verdes,
Because when
generalmente los
you
criterios de
deal
calidad, de
with green
eficiencia
procurement,
y de
you have to
emisiones
take
de
into
CO2 son
account
criterios
quality
que se deben
efficiency,
revisar también en
CO2,
la
and
evaluación
other
del precio. Este,
criteria
por ejemplo, ya es un
that have to
ejemplo.
be contemplated
También
when
no sé,
evaluating
otras
the price.
limitaciones como
There are
serían, por ejemplo,
other
precios o márgenes de preferencia, algunas limitaciones para las
other
organizaciones
limitations are
nacionales,
marginal prices or
prohibición
margin
de que
prices
empresas
and the
extranjeras no
review
puedan participar en
of
licitaciones
foreign
públicas.
companies which
Esta
may
cuestión
participate
general
or
debe
not
ser considerada
in
al
public
momento
procurement.
de
All these
pensar cómo podemos
details
realizar la
have to
estrategia.
be taken
También
into
es
account when
importante
you
hacer un
design
mapeo
the
de las
strategy.
instituciones relevantes. Hay
So,
un ente
number
centralizado
two,
que
you
pueda
have a
generar guías
mapping or
con
to
la
map the
información de
relevant
los entes
decisional framework, the
descentralizados,
relationship
buscándolo de
which exists
manera
between
independiente,
decentralized
para tener la
agencies, whether
posibilidad
they are
de poder
A,
optar siempre
independent
por
or not,
permisos para la
and the
inclusión de
chances they
criterios de
have to assume
sostenibilidad.
commitments in order
También
to
tenemos un
apply
mapeo
sustainability
de los
criteria.
compromisos
Number
internacionales,
three,
que también
mapping
son
of
relevantes
related
de
international
incluir dentro
trade
de estos
commitments,
compromisos
those which are
podrían ser un
enforced,
obstáculo o no a la
because
inclusión
sometimes
de
these
criterios de
commitments may
sostenibilidad.
erect a
Otro
hurdle
criterio
for
es también seguir
sustainability criteria.
las compras públicas electrónicas y los sistemas existentes
Number
estén
four,
en marcha
assessing the adequacy
para
of
cumplir estos
e-procurement policies
criterios.
and systems.
Identificar también si existen otras barreras que puedan
We have to identify whether there are other
entorpecer la
barriers or
eficiente
obstacles
implementación de las
for the
consideraciones
efficient
medioambientales.
implementation
Hacer
of
un mapeo
these
de quiénes son los
regulations. We have to
participantes,
map
las partes interesadas,
who
no solamente
the
el sector público, sino
stakeholders are,
también el
not
sector
only in the
privado,
public sector, but
gremios,
also in the private
asociaciones,
sector,
otras partes
unions,
o otros
associations,
members civil
partnerships,
que puedan también tener
members of
cierta
civil
injerencia o
society, which
cierto
may
efecto dentro de lo que
be
sería esta
interested in
implementación.
the effects
Y
of the
por último,
implementation of
uno de
these
los puntos más
regulations.
importantes a tener
And
en
last,
cuenta es analizar la capacidad
we
que
have to
tienen las
assess the
empresas
economy's capacity for
que están participando
supplying
en el
green
mercado
goods and
de poder
services
proveer o
and the benefits
suministrar
of
estos
costs of
bienes y
implementing
servicios con criterios de
GPP.
sostenibilidad, porque si no es esto posible, entonces ya estamos hablando de
Why
un mercado donde
this?
realmente no
Because if
podemos
this is
implementar algo
does
que
not
no se
occur,
puede. Y no solamente la
we
capacidad que
cannot
tengan, sino
implement
también
things
cuáles serían
which
las barreras que
are not
puedan tener
implementable.
y también los
Let's put it that
costos de
way.
implementar estos
The
criterios
costs
de
of
sostenibilidad.
implementing the
El hablar
sustainability
también de estas
criteria
barreras,
entail
quiero
all these
aprovechar desde la primera
aspects.
sesión un
So,
poco sobre lo que es las
as we
pymes.
spoke
Al hablar de esto también tenemos
about the
que
barriers
mencionar
and
cuál es el
SEPs,
estado de las pymes
we have
y si
to
estas,
see
por
what the
ejemplo,
state
los
is
criterios que
and
vamos a
whether these
involucrar o los criterios que vamos a
criteria,
estar incluyendo en los pliegos podrían
which we're going
generar
to
ciertas
include in
barreras
our
adicionales
bidding
para
processes,
que estos
whether
puedan
the
participar del
different
mercado de compras
criteria are
públicas. Por
going
eso
to
son
build
varias
new
cuestiones que tenemos que tener
barriers.
en cuenta
So there are
al
several
momento
things
de
that have to
desarrollar
be borne in mind, as you can see,
una
when we
buena estrategia.
design
Y si
a
desarrollamos
good
estrategia, ver
strategy.
también qué herramientas tenemos para
And we also
facilitar
have to see
la
which
inclusión de
tools
las pymes y de
we
las
have at our
microempresas. Por ejemplo,
disposal
que el
to
sistema de
include or
firmas
to
públicas
mainstream
electrónicas permita el acceso,
SMEs
que
and
permita tener
businesses, for example,
la
procurement, the
disponible.
assessment
Bueno,
information,
estos
whether
ejemplos
it's
son más
available or not.
rápidamente. Sigamos
Well,
al
all
paso
these
2.
steps are going to
Una
see
vez que tenemos
in the course of this
tenemos una pregunta aquí.
presentation.
Voy a responder la pregunta.
I have a question here.
Una vez que tenemos este mapeo de las
Once you
condiciones y
have
de las
mapped
posibles
the
obstáculos,
conditions
entonces
and
tenemos ya
probable
una
hurdles,
base para generar o
you
diseñar
have the
nuestra
foundation on
estrategia de
which you
compras
can
públicas
design
sostenibles o de compras
the
públicas verdes.
strategy of
Entonces,
green
el primer paso
procurement.
es iniciar la estrategia,
The
luego
first
diseñar
step
nuestra estrategia,
is
comunicar la
to design
estrategia
the
y ver cuáles
strategy,
son los
design the
compromisos
strategy,
que podemos implementar para
communicate
que esta
the
estrategia tenga
GPP
un valor
strategy,
para las
and then we
entidades que
have to
van a estar
establish a general
implementándola.
commitment to implement
Al hablar de
GPP
diseñar la
policies.
estrategia,
When we say
¿cuáles son
that we
los
have
pasos
to
que tenemos que tener en
design a
cuenta? ¿Cuáles
strategy,
son
what
los
are the different
elementos? Porque
steps
una cosa es
this
hablar de la estrategia
entails?
y otra cosa es
One
tenerla, estos
thing is
criterios
what we may
y
say in
aplicarlos a
theory,
la
and another
tierra donde
thing
nos
is to
movamos.
have criteria and apply them
Entonces,
in the terrain.
algunos elementos esenciales al
Some of
momento
the
de diseñar
essential
la estrategia
elements when
son,
you
en primer
design
lugar,
a GPP strategy are
identificar
the
los
following.
propósitos,
First,
cuáles son las prioridades y
identify
cuáles son los objetivos, qué
purpose,
queremos lograr,
priorities,
cuál
and
es el plazo
objectives.
que nos proponemos.
What we want
Queremos
to
tener
aim
ir,
at,
ir
what
más por el
the
lado medioambiental,
timeline
queremos también
is,
incluir criterios
whether
sociales.
apart from the environmental
Este
aspects,
plan
we
lo vamos a
want to
diseñar
include
en 5
social
años,
aspects.
10 años,
Are we
30
going to
años.
implement
¿Cuáles son
this
los
in
objetivos que
5
proponemos
years,
esto
10
o cuáles son
years,
las condiciones que
15
tenemos para
years?
poder llegar a cumplir
So
estos
what
objetivos?
the conditions are to
Otro
attain
paso
our
que tenemos que hacer
objectives.
es definir
Then
cuáles son
another
los
is
productos o los servicios
to
de
define
prioridad o los sectores de
priority
prioridad.
of product and
La primera
service
recomendación que podemos
sectors.
tener acá es
We
que no
usually
hay que
find the
empezar siendo
recommendation
muy
that you
ambiciosos.
don't have to be
Empecemos con la teoría del
extremely
punto
ambitious at
alto.
the
¿A qué
beginning.
me refiero con esto? Me
So
refiero con sectores
let's see
que ya
the
donde
theory
la
of the
implementación de los
mature
criterios
point.
es más fácil y lleva
That is to
menos,
say, to
menos
identify those
tiempo,
areas
menos
in which it
costos.
is
Y
easy to
luego empezar
implement
cómo
the
empezar a desarrollarlo
strategy
para
with
ir
fewer
ampliando
costs.
esto a
And
otros
then
sectores. Un
having
ejemplo es
had a good
importante
beginning, then you can
en la definición
widen up
del sector
your
es, por ejemplo, el sector de la
aim.
energía. Y sobre todo el uso de bombillas que sean
We
eficientes
may
y
say, for
energéticas.
example, the
Un
use of
estudio que
light
leí cuando
bulbs
estábamos también
in
la
terms of
GPC dice que
energy. When we
a
speak
nivel
about
mundial,
SDGs, for
si
example,
reemplazamos las
at
bombillas
global
por
level, if we
productos
replace light bulbs
energéticamente eficientes, el
by
costo
energy
total se
efficient
reduce en 120 mil
light
millones de
bulbs,
dólares. Obviamente, esta es una
$120
exageración porque es
billion
imposible
dollars
reemplazar
are going
todos,
to be
pero si
saved. Of
reemplazamos
course,
gran
you
parte
cannot
de
replace
los
the
bombillos
whole
en
of
un
them,
sector,
but
por
if you
ejemplo,
can replace, for
según
example, a
estimaciones
sector,
del Estado,
let's
sí
say, for
podemos
example,
lograr en unos años
state-owned
cierta reducción de
institutions,
costos. ¿Y qué significa
we're
esto?
going
Que
to
esto es
reduce
un
costs
monto
with the
adicional
passing
que va a
of
estar
some years.
disponible
And this is an
para un
additional
aula más,
amount you will have for
una
another
clínica más,
classroom,
la
for another
contratación de más
hospital,
inspectores para los servicios
for
de salud
hiring
pública. Entonces
more
vemos así que esto
doctors
realmente
for
integrado
public
con
health.
toda la
So
economía
as you can
en
see,
general. Vamos
all
por
these
pequeños pasos
aspects
y
are
después vamos
integrated.
creciendo
We have to make
a mayores objetivos.
small
Una vez
steps
que tenemos
in
estos
order to
sectores de
achieve
prioridad ya
bigger
bien identificados,
objectives.
es donde
When we have
determinamos cuáles
defined
son los
these
criterios
first, we have
de
to
sostenibilidad que
determine
vamos a ir
the
incluyendo.
sustainability
Más
criteria
adelante te
we're
voy a dar
going to
ejemplos
add.
específicos,
I'm going to give
pero
you
ahora quiero
specific
mencionarte
examples,
acá no hay necesidad de empezar de cero y de
but let me tell you that
atraer
you
a
have to
personas
start
expertas y
from
decir,
scratch.
decime cómo yo puedo, cuáles son los criterios, cómo puedo esto implementar. En otras
We have
jurisdicciones,
to
como por
see
ejemplo en la Unión
how we're
Europea
going to
o
implement
inclusive
what we have designed in the
Administración
European
General de
Union.
Servicios de los Estados Unidos,
And for
presentan
example,
recursos
the
integrales para la
GSA in
aplicación
the
de
United
estos
States,
criterios.
there are
Descartando un
general
poco lo que sería el instrumento que tiene la Unión Europea,
guidelines
que
for
es
the application
un
of this
lineamiento
criteria.
donde
In the European
califica
Union, you have a
20
guideline
sectores
in
difíciles de
which
prioridad
you
e
find
incluye
20
dentro de estos
priority
sectores, por
sectors,
ejemplo,
and
posibles
within those
verificaciones técnicas que
20
pueden ser
priority
utilizadas
sectors,
para cada
you
uno de
have
estos de
technical
acuerdo a criterios de sostenibilidad
specifications
previamente definidos. Una
following
vez que
previously
implementamos esto,
defined
la estrategia
sustainability criteria.
requiere que hagamos una
Next
evaluación porque
is
para
to
monitorear y controlar más
monitor
adelante si realmente la
what
estrategia
we have
fue
done
exitosa.
in
En
order to
caso
see
de que
whether
no,
our
volver
strategy
otra vez de
was
vuelta a
successful or
identificar los
not. If it
propósitos,
was not
modificarla
successful,
o si
we have
vemos
to
que fue
go
exitosa,
backwards
bueno,
and we
vamos a
have
incluir otros
to
sectores y así vamos
modify
haciendo una
our
economía mucho
strategy
más
to
eficiente,
add
más
other
circular y
sectors.
más sostenible.
And then we're going to have a more efficient and
Step
circular
3 and 4,
economy.
back to you.
Now, 3 and 4, back to Bob.
Thank you, Antonella. Oh, and by the way, Veronica, there's a question in the chat. Shall we, would you, but
Sí, exacto. Luz Marina nos hizo una pregunta muy
Yes,
interesante.
exactly. Luz Marina posed a very interesting question.
Así que, Luz Marina,
Sí.
gracias por adelantarte.
Thank you, Luz Marina, for having
Bueno,
raised this
nos
question.
pregunta si
She asks,
dice que cree que alguna de las
she
principales
believes that
restricciones
one of
para
the main
implementar las
restrictions to
políticas
implement
sostenibles de compras públicas es el
sustainable
costo
public
mismo,
procurement
¿no?
policies
En
is
el
their
ámbito
cost.
internacional se habla
Internationally,
sobre la necesidad de que los países que más contaminan
they have discussed about the need for high polluting countries to pay for that pollution, or that developed countries should pay developing countries in order not to follow the same growth path. So how can we link these initiatives in order to make sustainable public procurements become a reality?
I would have a few observations, and then maybe Antonella would all have a few points as well. So actually, thank you for raising this. And this brings in a concept that we refer to as environmental justice. Okay, and so I think it is a fair point to raise that certain countries have indulged heavily in fossil fuel-based technologies, and it's a real concern. And you know, other countries, poor countries especially, do not have the resources to sort of take the lead in addressing these major problems and concerns. So I'm just going to say, I think it's a fair point that you raise. And I think this is one of the big points that is discussed in what we call the COP discussions internationally, the process that started in Paris long ago now and continues under the auspices of the United Nations and other organizations. And it's a fair point. So we need and this actually speaks to the need for international coordination and international agreements. So we should not look first and foremost to the poor countries to fix these problems. The rich countries need to take the lead. I would agree with that statement. Even so, I hope that eventually all countries will participate. All countries have an interest and a stake here. And, you know, the costs are real, but they also, once we start down this path of sustainable technology, the costs will decline over time. And that's something we know as well from climate change science and from experience. The costs will decline over time. And we also know that, yes, in a sense, it's more costly to purchase things that are environmentally sustainable and contribute to climate change mitigation. In a sense, it is more costly, but it also responds to the critical need. So, you know, in a way, you shouldn't view it as only costly if you are purchasing goods and services that will make your country a more hospitable environment in which to live and develop. These are my thoughts in response to an important question. I would welcome anyone else's thoughts, and I think, and as I say, you know, I believe the world needs to reflect on these issues and is reflecting on these issues. And I believe that the richer countries should be taking the lead in transitioning to greener technologies. But I also believe that ultimately we need the whole world to participate in this process.
Gracias, Rob. Y una observación observación adicional.
Thank you, Rob.
Creo que,
Another
como dijo Rob,
observation.
esto debe iniciar en
This
países más
needs to be
desarrollados
started
que
off
han
by
tenido
developed
un impacto
countries
mayor
that
en la
have had a
economía y en las
higher impact
consideraciones
on the economy
medioambientales.
and in the environmental
Y esto a su
considerations.
vez va a tener
This,
un
in
efecto
turn,
que va a
is
ir
going to
repercutiendo a
create
los
an
países
effect
en vías de desarrollo en el
that is
sentido
going
que
to be
estas
expanded to
tecnologías
developing
que fueron
countries. And what do I
desarrolladas
mean?
para
These
poder
technologies developed
cumplir, para poder hacer frente
to
a estos
address
déficits para
these
ser
issues
transferidas
are
a
going
los
to be
otros países. Y
transferred
una
to other
forma
countries.
de
And
que la
one
transferencia de
way
tecnología pueda
for
ser
these
llevada a cabo
technology
es a
transfers
través
to be
del
done
acceso al
is
mercado
through
y el
market
acceso
access
al mercado de compras públicas a través de
to
acuerdos
the public
internacionales. Si
procurement
vemos,
market.
ciertamente tenemos un gran daño que se
And if
hizo,
we
pero
have
hubo acciones
huge
que han sido
harm
llevadas
here,
a cabo
we
y
have
cierta
actions that
tecnología
are
que está
being
siendo llevada a
undertaken. And
cabo
these
va a ir
technologies
pasando gradualmente
are going
a los
to
países a través de la
be
transferencia de tecnología
trickle
que también
down
es
to
facilitada a
countries for
través de la
technology
apertura del
transfer that
mercado
is
y de
facilitated
participación
through
en
market
acuerdos
access and
internacionales.
participation in
Y dos
international
últimas
agreements.
observaciones adicionales. Una es sobre el
Two
costo.
other points.
También debemos saber que
One
a
about
medida
the
que el mercado
cost.
cambia, también
Once the market
la nueva solución
changes,
sostenible
the new
puede
sustainable
realmente no llegar a ser la más
solutions
cara, porque como dije,
might
mayor
not be the
tecnología,
most
desarrollo,
costly
economía de
Mhm.
escala, pueden
because of
cambiar
economies
esto.
of scales.
Asimismo,
They
también
can
si
change the
tenemos, como ya había
scenario.
mencionado anteriormente, si
So
solamente utilizamos el
if I
criterio
only
del precio más
use a
bajo,
criterion of
esto
the
puede crear
lowest
ciertas
price, this can
externalidades
create
que
some
tarde o temprano puedan
externalities
salir
that
más
sooner or
caras si
later
usamos ciertos criterios o
can be
ciertos
more
bienes o servicios que
costly
puedan tener un
than
riesgo
using
más
goods and
sostenible o que
services that
puedan
are more
o
sustainable,
estos se lleven a cabo o se consideren, por ejemplo, el ciclo de vida
or
de
some
ciertos productos o de
criteria that
ciertos servicios.
consider the
Entonces,
product
es
or
cierto,
services
coincido
life
100%
cycle.
con
So
Luz Marina en
I
una pregunta.
I
Hay
agree
casos de que también
100%
hay
with Luz
soluciones de
Marina
sostenibilidad
and
que
her
pueden
question
conllevar a costos adicionales, no solamente
in the sense
para
that
quien
these
produce,
can
sino también
entail
para el país
additional
que
costs for
compra.
the
Y
producers,
estas
but
son
also for the
cuestiones que
buyers. But
tarde o temprano
these
vamos a tener que
issues,
ir
sooner or
incluyendo dentro de las
later,
compras
need
públicas.
to
Y
be
bueno,
included
la
within
idea es
public
justamente
procurement.
empezar de a
And our
poco, empezar
idea
desde
is
el
to
orden de
start
prioridad y luego
slowly
ir
in
creciendo.
priority sectors
Tenemos una
to
pregunta de
be
Esteban.
growing.
Esteban,
Then
si puedes prender tu
Esteban has
micrófono, así te
raised
escuchamos todos. Veo que tu
his
voz está
hand.
atragantada.
Esteban, can you
No sé si me
can
escuchan.
you open your
Escuchamos.
mic?
¿Qué
Can you
tal,
hear
Antonella?
me?
¿Qué tal, Robert?
Good
Muchas
afternoon,
gracias por su
Antonella and
presentación.
Robert. Thank you for your
Es un gusto estar
presentation.
aquí.
I'm very
Yo
pleased to
tengo
be
una
here.
consulta. Antonella, tú mencionabas que
Antonella,
existen
you said
especificaciones
that
técnicas
there are technical
que se
specifications
pueden considerar al momento de hacer
that can be
una
considered
contratación pública verde.
at the
Entonces,
time
yo quería
of making
consultarte
a green procurement.
qué deben tener en términos generales de estas
What
especificaciones
should
técnicas.
these technical
Eso por un lado.
specifications contain
Y por
in
otro lado,
general?
tenía otra
That's
pregunta, es acerca de
one
los
question.
servicios.
And the other one is
¿Los
about
servicios en general
services.
son verdes
Are
o no?
those services green or not?
Esa era mi otra pregunta. Y un poco
And,
para cerrar el debate de lo
and
que
in
se
order
estaba conversando del
to,
tema
to conclude
de
this
este catch-up
debate,
de los países en desarrollo hacia los países
developing
desarrollados
countries should
a
catch
través
up with developed countries
del
through
combate al cambio climático.
fighting the
Es una
climate
observación,
change.
bueno, es un punto de vista personal que tengo.
This is my
Los
personal
países
view, is
desarrollados
that
se
developed
desarrollaron
countries
gracias al consumo de
became
energía
developed
y en muchos de los casos de energía que
through
contamina.
by
Como es
consuming
el caso de algunos
fossil
países en
fuel
Asia
energy,
o Medio
such as
Oriente.
some Asian
Entonces,
or
hay
Middle
teorías en
East
que dicen
countries.
obviamente
So there are theories
países
stating that
andinos o países en
that
subdesarrollo
Andean countries
lleguen
or
a países
underdeveloped
desarrollados
countries
necesitan
to
consumir energía,
become
ya
developed,
sea
they need to consume
contaminante
energy,
como el
whether it's
biodiesel
polluting,
perdón,
like biodiesel,
los
no, I'm
combustibles
sorry,
fósiles o no,
fossil
como son
fuels,
los, la energía eólica, nuclear, etcétera, etcétera, o
nuclear energy or
energía eléctrica,
wind energy or electric
Eso
energy.
era básicamente
That's
punto de vista
basically my point of
Muchas gracias.
view. And thank you.
Muchas gracias a vos, Esteban. Bueno,
Thank you, Esteban,
de
for your
tres
comments.
puntos, te comento que el primer punto vamos a estar
The
tratando
first
en detalle más adelante.
point
En el punto 5 vamos a estar hablando justamente de las
is going to
especificaciones
be
técnicas y de
discussed in
cómo estas
point
pueden
5
adaptarse
in
a los
technical
pliegos
specification
de
and how they
sostenibilidad.
can
Sobre el punto
adjust
2,
to
los
tender
servicios sí
documentations,
pueden ser
including
verdes
sustainability.
100%.
Services can be
Por
100%
ejemplo, en el
green
servicio de desechos, el servicio de
in
recolección de
waste
basuras, cómo
services,
hace,
in
cómo
garbage
una vez que la
collections,
basura se recoge.
once
cómo
it
después
is
se trata
collected,
en los
how
servicios
is the
de
garbage
limpieza,
treated?
cómo se
Then
desecan
cleaning
todos los
services,
productos
how do you
químicos que se
dispose of
utilizaron,
chemicals
las
that were
ropas, los
used?
servicios de investigación, como bioquímicos, las ropas que se están
Biochemicals,
utilizando, cómo esto después
the clothes that are being
llega a
used.
usar, los textiles, cómo son
How do you use
desarrollados,
textiles?
la
How are they
producción.
developed?
Le voy a dar más ejemplos más
Also in
adelante,
the
pero si quedan
building
preguntas,
sector,
los
I'm going to
servicios
give you
también pueden
details
ser verdes.
later ahead in the
El último
presentation,
punto sobre las
but
energías, una de las
services
ventajas que
are
tenemos
indeed
bastante acá en
green.
Latinoamérica
And
es
then
que
your
nuestras
last
fuentes de
point,
energía
energy. Our
son
energy
en muchos
sources
países renovables.
are
Acá en
mostly
Paraguay la
renewable in
energía
many
es
countries. In
100%
Paraguay,
renovable
energy
porque
is 100%
viene de las
renewable
hidroeléctricas.
because it comes
No
from
porque en Europa, por ejemplo, tienen
hydroelectric
muchos
plants.
problemas
In
porque
Europe, they
están
have
intentando
a lot of
descarbonizar
problems
todo, pero
because they
ahora
are
hay
trying to
crisis por la
decarbonize
guerra y hay cuestiones que de
everything.
repente
Now
no
they
se
have
pueden
the
solucionar
war, a
así. Yo
crisis,
creo que una
so
ventaja que tenemos acá con la
solutions are not
energía es que
easy.
acá en
So our
Latinoamérica
advantage,
sí estamos, yo creo, un
considering
paso
energy, is that
bastante
in Latin
avanzado en el
America,
tema
we
del
are
uso de
a
la
step
energía
ahead in
renovable.
terms of using
Y bueno,
renewable energies.
Rob, if you want to comment anything else,
Rob,
please go ahead.
do you
And
want
then, of
to,
course,
do you
for
have
Esteban,
any
feel
other
free.
comment for Esteban, or do you think we can continue to move forward with the presentation? You have the floor.
I would just say, Antonella, and thank you, Esteban, and thank you, Antonella. You've made a really interesting point, which is that if I'm understanding correctly, and of course, it's not that I know the Andean region so well, but I think you're saying that to some extent, countries in Latin America may be ahead of countries in Europe and North America in terms of this transition to public procurement. And this is a perfect example of how greening public procurement can become an advantage, a commercial advantage for you. And so, let's not neglect this aspect as well. We have the opportunity. It may be actually working very well in terms of your growth and development to pursue a green public procurement strategy. This is just the point I wanted to make. If I resume now on to the slide regarding step 3, this is just, I think it's pretty clear and straightforward. Yes, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Rob, for your answer. That's what Esteban is saying.
Oh, thank you, Esteban, for raising very important questions. So this slide is very easy. It's just to say, don't forget to consult with the stakeholders at every step. And, you can use questionnaires. It's important to follow, to monitor existing use patterns. You can have review and planning meetings. You can invite users to attend supplier demonstrations. All of these are tools that can be useful in designing and in implementing the green public procurement strategy. Next slide, please, Antonella. Okay. And again, this is a point just to emphasize the importance of training and institution building. And I said earlier, and I strongly believe that the public procurement professionals themselves have a critical role to play in the implementation of a successful green public procurement strategy. As we've just been discussing, this involves weighing some trade-offs. It's not necessary. It's not an obvious path. You have to think through these things. And this slide is only to say that you should get some help in addressing these problems. And GPP is a further example of the need for what we call professionalization of the procurement profession. And we do not believe in treating public procurement in a kind of checkbox fashion. We believe that public procurement is a profession, and it's a profession that demands specialized skills And therefore, it deserves dedicated specialized training programs. And so, in other words, we shouldn't just be telling public procurement officers, oh, go out and implement the green public procurement strategy. Think about environmental considerations all the time. Well, you need some help and some training and orientation to do that. And these are some of the different possibilities. Tailored workshops, preparation of guidelines, publications, platforms for shared learning, and so forth. Next slide, please, Antonella.
Rob, solo para complementar y dar un ejemplo de la
In
reunión
order
que
to
tuvimos
complement
en el
what you've
2023
just said,
de
in Latin
compra,
America in
desarrolló una guía
2010,
de consulta de mercados
the
para
Compra
compradores públicos.
drafted a
La guía
guide
de
for
consultas de
public
mercado es una
procurers,
herramienta
and the
para la
consultations
determinación
of the
y
market is a
través de
tool
eso,
for the
las consultas
preparation of
formales,
policies, and
que
through
se hacen
formal
organismos varias veces, no
consultation,
solo para estudiar
they
las
have
necesidades
used
del
this
sector,
mechanism
sino
several
también para
times, not only to study
implementar
what was
criterios
going
de
in the sector, but
accesibilidad.
also to
Rob,
mainstream some environmental criteria. Up to you now.
So, I mean, this is just a simple slide that reflects all the different groups that need to be involved in the training and institution building process, because the green public procurement strategy will not succeed without their support. So it includes senior officials and administrators. It includes the procurement staff from the different purchasing institutions, internal specialists. The larger procurement authorities are going to need specialists that, have a special background in environmental protection. Politicians and decision makers, the supplier community. Public procurement is a partnership. It's the government drawing upon the services of the private sector, the power and the energy of the private sector, using the private sector to serve public goals. That's what the public procurement process is. So you must involve the suppliers and the business community in the learning process and the consensus building process. Chambers of commerce can be a useful point of contact. Local residents need to be involved, and civil society. This means public organizations that are interested, for example, in environmental protection and also in integrity in public procurement. So what we're trying to stress here is that to really be successful, a green public procurement strategy won't really work and achieve its desired goals if it's only taken seriously within the government department and the public service. Rather, you need to engage all of these different players in the institution and consensus building process. This is how it's going to work. Okay. Next slide, please, Antonella. And I think this one is back to you.
Esta es la mía, justamente. Esto es lo que le había mencionado, pero antes de ir ahí,
Before
quería mencionar también que,
plunging into
como
the
dijo Rob,
next
es importante
screen,
resaltar que
I
gran
want
parte
to
de la promoción de
underscore
las
that
compras verdes
most
o de las
of
compras
the
sostenibles está en manos de los
sustainable
usuarios, y de
procurement
convencerlos de que simplemente aceptar el precio más bajo no es la forma más
are
eficiente de
made
compra,
by
que
public
las
officials,
posibilidades
and
o
we
las
have to convince them that the lowest price is not the best option.
superar el costo de adquirir bienes
Mm.
y servicios
And
sostenibles.
this is going to go
Además,
beyond the
volviendo a
actual
lo que dijo
purchase.
Rob, es
As
bueno
Bob
y es
suggested, it is a
realmente
good thing
importante involucrar a la comunidad local y la
to
sociedad civil,
involve
ya que
the
ellos
local
también son
community and the
usuarios
civil
que también se
society, because
benefician de la
they
calidad
are
y
the
la
final
operación de
users
sus
who are
mercados,
going to
y por lo
use
tanto también son
or to reap
receptores
the
para el
benefits
beneficio de
of
la
the
comunidad
goods and
negativa.
services
Necesariamente
which were
nosotros saber
purchased.
cómo están manejándose ellos,
So
cómo está bien ese
we
sector
have
y
to know
impactan la sociedad para
how
poder ver si
these two
cambiamos,
sectors are
mejoramos,
impacted
volvemos a
in
desear,
order to see
y así tener una estrategia
what changes may be
eficiente.
introduced in order to have a more
Vamos a ver un
efficient
poco de lo que
strategy.
sería,
Now, let's
los
see
criterios que podemos ir
step
incluyendo
5,
en el
the different
llamado orden de
criteria
foco. Como habíamos
that may be included in the competition. For example, the different legislation, as you know, is focused on what to buy instead of what to buy is. So we see what criteria we have to use in order to buy. That's why that leaves some room for discretion. And these criteria may be included in different sectors of the conditions, together with the definition what is going to be paid. For example, if we are going to purchase power, 100%, for example, has to be specified from renewable energy sources, or purchase of at least 50% of electricity from renewable energy sources and or high efficient cogeneration, supply or recycled paper, cleaning services with reduced environmental impact. And these criteria may be mainstream in the technical specifications, which set the characteristics or which specify the characteristics of the goods and services in terms of quality, the quantity of the resource, employment, security or safety, all the methods for the production or the supply. These technical characteristics may be based upon the functionality of the good and service and the performance. And when we deal with this performance, this allows for more flexibility because you may mention the specific methods of production. If you want to build a school which is self-sufficient in terms of energy, you have to say what it has to be. So it introduces some flexibility because you can introduce, for example, an engine to obtain water or others. And this allows also for some creativity. So we are not going to limit ourselves on some characteristics, but we create a new market and new ideas have to be introduced. When we speak about technical specification, we may speak about printers, eco printers, paper which has been produced without certain chemical products, without chlorine, for example, food which are produced organically. And seals or certification eco-labels are a good tool. They may be environmental or social. All these labels, the energy label, for example, there are different examples which may be purchased or applied by different businesses, which may use in relation to technical specifications. But they don't have to be used in order to create greenwashing, that is to say, to clean up your image. You are not going, we are not, for example, treating or dealing with an environmental or green company, but a business which tries to cover up its performance with labels. And this has to do, for example, with disposal of waste. Although the use of seals is an easy task, it's not so complicated, they have to be used in such a way as avoid greenwashing. As we spoke about SMEs, certain technical specifications, although they may apply sustainability criteria, they may create barriers. For example, if you introduce green labels, this may impose or
y
require
por tanto,
certain
sin ese
conditions,
sello no pueden
businesses are
no
not
pueden tenerlo dentro de su
able
lo que
to
sería
comply with.
la empresa. Entonces, a raíz de esto,
Hence,
de los criterios o una de las soluciones que se
one
da
of the
es,
criteria,
si
one of
por
the
ejemplo van
solutions
a pedir
presented is
sellos o van a incluir
if
sellos
we are
o
going to
certificaciones en las
require eco
especificaciones
labels or
técnicas,
certifications
también se pueden
within
incluir
technical
el
specifications,
equivalente
we
o una
may also
documentación donde diga
include
que la
an
empresa por tal
equivalent,
motivo no pudo, pero sí tiene
or, for
algo
example, something like
equivalente
the
que hace de que
company
pueda
does
cumplir
not
con los
have
criterios que este sello
a certain
involucra. De esta
label,
manera
but
generamos
it
un
has
cierto
an equivalent
nivel de juego parejo entre las distintas
level.
empresas.
In this way, you
También
level the field for all the
estos
companies,
criterios
all the
de
businesses.
sostenibilidad podemos incluirlos
These
en la selección,
sustainability
en los criterios de
criteria may
selección de
also
las
be
distintas
applied
organizaciones
in the
ofertantes a
selection
través, por ejemplo,
criteria
de estándares
through
ISO, la implementación de
ISO
un
standards
sistema
and
de
the
administración
implementation
medioambiental.
of
Por ejemplo, estos
environmental
sistemas pueden ser
management.
utilizados también
These
en el
systems
área
may
de
be
los servicios
used
cuando
in the area
cierta
of services
construcción deba llevarse a
when
cabo en una zona que
a
esta zona
certain
está
construction
protegida por
is
cuestiones
going to
medioambientales,
be erected in an area
es
which
una
is
zona
protected
protegida.
due to environmental
Entonces, en
regions,
el
in
caso
an
que una empresa
environmentally protected area.
deba construirse
Let
y
us
sea
speak
responsable
about
de esta zona o
a
deba
road, for
construirse un
example,
puente,
which is
entonces
going
nuestros
to
sistemas
cross
medioambientales lo que
an
hacen, por
area
ejemplo, es
or the
que haya
construction of a
sistemas que permitan, por ejemplo,
bridge.
controlar
In
el
this way,
nivel de
we
sonido,
must
que hay
have
una
a
fauna
system which is going
bastante
to monitor
alta
the
en esta
level of
zona,
sounds,
cómo
that
los desechos
fauna is
son
protected,
reducidos,
and that
cómo las aguas
waste are
pluviales son
disposed
eliminadas de la
of,
zona.
how
Distintas cuestiones
wastewaters
pueden
are
también llevar
eliminated.
a incluir estos criterios verdes, por ejemplo, en el área de construcción.
Another items which
Por ejemplo,
may
como
be
dije, decía
covered
también la
by
exclusión
green
otro
resolutions.
criterio de selección puede ser
Another
excluir
criteria is the
a
exclusions due to
empresas que
previous
hayan
environmental
violado anteriormente
violations.
cuestiones medioambientales. No obstante, esta exclusión debe tenerse en
However,
cuenta
this
que no es,
exclusion
no es muy simple poner en el sentido que la exclusión siempre tiene
is
que
not a
estar
simple
relacionada a la definición del
tool to
precio máximo
use because
comprable.
it has to be
Entonces, no siempre
associated
puede ser que pueda
with the
ser o sea, un
definition of
motivo de
what you're going to
protesta
buy.
que
So
en la compra, no sé, de muebles de
if
oficina,
you buy, for
diga
example, office
que una de
furniture,
las exclusiones es haber violado
you
cuestiones
may have
medioambientales,
as an
porque no está
exclusion
directamente
the
relacionado
violation of environmental
en la definición de
aspects.
lo que pueda
That is
comprar.
not
Pero, por ejemplo, en el caso
related
de
directly to the
un llamado
definition of
que
what you're
sea
going to
para
buy.
la reducción de los
But
desechos
if you have
de plantas
a
o la
bidding
reducción
for
de la
the
basura,
reduction
entonces
disposal
sí,
of
una
waste,
exclusión válida sí es que anteriormente
a
esta empresa haya
valid
tenido deficiencias
exclusion
en la ejecución del
is
contrato.
having efficiencies or
Otra
the lack
parte
thereof.
donde también tenemos criterios es en los precios o
Another
en la evaluación de los precios.
Another
Saltando ahora por
criteria
la
is
siguiente diapositiva,
prices.
voy a estar hablando más en
Now,
detalle. Y
I'm going to speak about
una de las últimas
details
partes
about
donde también tenemos
prices in the
criterios de sostenibilidad es, por
following
ejemplo, en la ejecución
screen.
misma del contrato.
And what
En el
about
sentido que para la ejecución, esta puede
sustainability
incluir, por
and the
ejemplo,
contract
que
performance?
el delivery o la entrega de los
You may
bienes
say that delivery
solamente se
of goods
realice
or
en
services
horas que
has
no
to
sean
be
pico
done
por el
at a
tráfico
certain
o
time,
para
which not
utilizar menos
peak
combustible
hour
o
or
solamente se
peak time
realicen, por ejemplo, 3
due
veces a la
to the
semana en vez de estar 7
excessive
veces a la
use
semana,
of fuel.
si es que
You may
supuestamente se
state
puede.
which
Requerir, por
days
ejemplo,
the
que
goods and services
al
have to be
adjudicado
delivered.
pueda
The
volver
winner
a buscar los materiales que puedan ser reciclados, por ejemplo, empaquetamiento.
has to use, for
Si se
example,
vendió, por ejemplo,
recyclable material for
si se vendió
packaging,
impresora, suministros, entonces que la empresa se encargue de
eco
también,
printers.
una vez que entrega el
This
paquete,
means
volver a
that
retirar de vuelta las cajas donde venían los
once
productos.
the
También
business
puede ser
delivers the
otro
boxes with the
criterio de
goods,
ejecución puede ser
it
el
has
reporte, por
to
ejemplo, de la
get them
emisión de
back,
gases cuando
get
tenemos obras de
those boxes
infraestructura
back.
muy grandes.
And the same may apply to certain
Como he
endeavors with
mencionado,
gas and big works.
los criterios de sostenibilidad
As I
también
said,
una
environmental
parte
criteria,
bastante importante donde pueden estar incluidos es en la evaluación misma del llamado o de las
may
ofertas.
be included
Como había mencionado
in the
anteriormente, lo que
award
intentamos
criteria.
hacer es que movernos o salir de este criterio del precio más bajo
We try
e
to
ir
leave
más a lo que
behind
sería el
the lowest
criterio de la
price
oferta
in
más
order to
ventajosa,
have
en el
the
sentido
most
que sí, que el precio va
advantageous
a seguir siendo
offer.
parte del esquema de
Price
evaluación,
is going to
también se
be
incluyen
part of the
otras
evaluation, of
cuestiones, como el
course,
ciclo de vida
but there are
producto,
other
la calidad,
aspects
y
such
también
as the
criterios
life cycle,
medioambientales.
quality,
Entonces,
and
por ejemplo,
environmental
del
criteria. Let me
100%
give you just an
puede ser el
example.
criterio,
If you
puede
have
ser que el 40% sea el precio, que
over
sea el más bajo,
100%, you may have
y el
40%
60%
allocated
restante
to
podemos
price,
decir,
and the
bueno,
rest,
un
60%,
30%
is broken down
de
into
criterios ambientales,
30% of
el 20%
environmental
sería la
criteria,
calidad,
and
vamos
the
a sacar
rest,
un poco
quality, and so on and so forth.
vamos a decir, de puntuación, aparte de lo que es el precio. Y si dijimos, por ejemplo, que del 60
And
o el 40%
if we said that
que va a ser
60 or
criterios ambientales,
40% for
les
environmental
decimos, para
criteria,
uso de vehículos
we say that
verdes va a ser
using
el
green
20% de
vehicle
eso,
is going
el
to
uso de
account for
tener una
10%,
etiqueta o un sello es el 20%,
and having a label
contar
accounts for
con sistemas de
20%,
administración medioambiental puede ser
and
un
having
20%,
environmental
y así
management
sucesivamente. Lo
system with
importante es tener en
20%,
cuenta
and
que hay
so on and so forth.
criterios
The important thing
adicionales
is to know
al
that there
precio
are
más bajo que pueden ser
additional
están
criteria to the
involucrados en la
lowest price
evaluación del llamado y
that
que
are
pueden llevar a
involved in the
resultados
tender, and
de
they
tal cual
can lead
gestión más sostenible o más verde.
to a greener or more
Habiendo dicho
sustainable procurement.
eso,
Having
nos
said
vamos a
this,
Rob,
let's
que nos va a
go
hablar un
back
poco de
to
cómo
Rob, who's
introducir
going to
estos criterios en
address
lo que serían los
the
acuerdos
topic of
internacionales y el trabajo a nivel
introducing
internacional.
all this in international and regional trade agreements and other initiatives.
So thank you so much, Antona. So this slide is just to say, to remind us that as one, one step in the process of implementing an effective green public procurement strategy can be the mainstreaming of GPP and environmental values generally into international and regional trade agreements. And these possibilities are already being actively pursued at the international level. By organizations such as OECD and the World Bank, EBRD, and also I think very much the Inter-American Development Bank. Also in the WTO government procurement agreement, there is an active discussion underway to explore the extent to which the GPA, this is called the GPA, Government Procurement Agreement, can be used, it can itself become a tool for the promotion of environmental values and to encourage countries to adopt green public procurement strategies. I'll have more to say about that in a few moments. And this also can be done at the regional and the bilateral level as well. And if we go to the next slide kind of is there to indicate that to a large extent, to a considerable extent, let's say, these things are already being done. And so, for example, in the CPTPP, this is the so-called Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, Chapter 15 of that agreement is concerned with government procurement, and there are at least 2 or 3 countries from Latin America that participate in that agreement. And Article 15.12, is all about ensuring that this agreement does not come in the way of adopting specifications to promote conservation of natural resources and the protection of the environment. So this is an important example of an agreement in which Latin American countries participate, which is already building in the importance of environmental conservation values. Another example is the so-called EU-Canada Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. And this actually probably goes further than other existing agreements in terms of elaborating and making possible the implementation of environmental protection values in public procurement processes that are covered by the agreement. You also find similar language in the so-called USMCA. This is the United States, Mexico, and Canada Trade Agreement in Chapter 13, covering government procurement. And the the recent Korea-Australia FTA is another example. So these are just examples. The point is that already the parties that are framing the new generation of international trade agreements are already seeking to build environmental protection values and sustainability considerations into the text of those agreements to ensure, as I said right at the beginning, to ensure that at a minimum, these agreements do not stand in the way of protection of the environment and climate change adaptation, and hopefully actually encourage those processes, encourage us to move forward to a greener future. And by the way, again, this is a good opportunity to say, I think it's perfectly legitimate for countries that are contemplating or entering into these agreements to raise issues of environmental justice. And this goes back to the discussion that we had with our two participants. The poorer countries should not be the ones that bear the principal costs of moving towards a greener world. These costs should be, the richer countries should take the lead in bearing these costs. I believe that. But I also believe that in the end, it will be beneficial to all the participating countries. We all have a stake in having a healthy and secure world to live in. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is just very easy to say that in pursuing this 7-step process, the final step is indeed monitoring and assessing the progress of the strategy. And all strategies eventually need to be updated and to be adjusted in light of relevant experience. So this is another aspect of the responsibility, of the heavy responsibilities that are covered by public procurement officials and leaders, and such as some of you who are watching this program. And so to monitor performance, to monitor the success of the strategy, and to reflect and ultimately to revisit and improve the strategy at the appropriate time. Next slide, please. Okay, and now we're going to move into the social aspects of sustainability. We can go directly to the next slide. And Antonella, you were going to take this up, I believe. Antonella, I'm not hearing you, by the way.
No te oímos. Antonella, we can't hear you. Your mic is off.
Muchas gracias, Rob.
Thank you, Bob.
Continúo. Bueno, mucho de lo que hablamos recién está relacionado a compras públicas verdes.
Most of this is related to green GPP and introducing criteria related to the environment, or things related to recycling, etc. As Rob has said at the beginning of the presentation, part of sustainability includes social aspects. Even though when we speak, when we said at the beginning, we devised this tool with different steps. We mentioned GPP or green procurement. This can be replaced easily by implementing sustainability consideration from a social and green perspective. I'm not going to repeat the 7 steps, but I want to say that this tool can be useful to include social aspects. And what are social aspects? There's a long tradition regarding the environmental criteria, and the social aspects started to appear over the last 15 or 20 years. And it started to be discussed within the public procurement world. And they are included, why? Because they can promote employment opportunities and social inclusion for disadvantaged people due to disabilities, or because they are more marginalized, more opportunities for businesses that follow social development policies, and it promotes equal labor opportunities and compliance with labor laws, accessibility and design for all, including the disabled, respecting human rights, and improving the standards of living of people through public procurement. As we said before, how to include environmental criteria. And now, here we are including social criteria. Started with the definition of what you're going to buy. It can be office furniture, suitable for all users, adapted to accessible workspaces. Instead of buying static chairs, they can be ergonomic chairs, so that people that have lower back problems or are in wheelchairs can easily work there. We also promote open workspaces for wheelchairs to have easy access to these spaces. Another definition is supplying food and beverages that have been produced through fair trade practices. And what do I mean by this? And I'm referring to goods involving suppliers that comply with fair wage policies, so on and so forth. And this is reflected in the labels that I'm going to describe later on. When we speak about technical specifications in terms of the chairs, for instance, they include disability access, and companies using social criteria labels. Fair trade is also another consideration when we buy chocolate bars or sugar or generic commodities. They usually have this fair trade label, meaning that they were sourced from green practices. Company selection, those working in line with the ILO standards, or these companies following some guidelines or labor standards. In assessing tender documentation, we can include criteria like companies. I mean, criteria must be related to what is being procured. In the case of cleaning services, the workers, we should have an equal proportion of gender there. Discrimination is discouraged. Guidelines against discrimination in case of working on waste disposal or in building areas. The staff should have safety measures. They should be adequately equipped. So the company should guarantee all these to carry their construction forward. There can also be cooperation with disadvantaged groups like veterans or indigenous people to be included within this social work. or companies guaranteeing participation in social security, minimum wages, adequate insurance, and compliance with labor laws. Now, contract performance, and here we have compliance with social standards through a certain contract. These people that are being hired, disadvantaged people or disabled people, can produce or require additional training for them to train other people. We also have to be in line with the country's labor law, where countries sourced the input that are delivered somewhere else. We have situations that in the value chains, the raw materials were acquired in one country, but it was produced somewhere else and supplied in another country. So all along the value chain, we need to ensure that all social aspects were complied with through fair trade. These are two labels. These labels cover or encompass concepts such as human rights consideration, fair labor standards, and the prohibition for child labor, payment, fair wages for developing suppliers, in developing countries, I mean. And the fair trade label that can be applied to commodity prices, meaning that the labor conditions from the initial production have considered international standards from the ILO, and the RUG mark is an Indian label that certifies that when producing goods or services in the textile sector, children have not been used. There's a ban on child labor. It's very common in Asian countries. So these seals or labels certify that there was not child labor or that some exploitation practices have been eliminated.
Menciono de vuelta que para incluir todos estos aspectos podemos incluirlos de la misma manera que hablamos en los primeros pasos, ver si empezando por el paso 1, ver las condiciones del mercado, si es que estos aspectos sociales pueden estar involucrados, diseñar una
Aspects may be included in the market, the strategy,
estas especificaciones,
specifications, analyzing the stakeholders, and to include all these requirements in the bidding conditions, and then to see whether the strategy has been efficient or whether we have to go back and to remedy some of the problems the strategy may have. Now, back to you, Rob, and then I'll speak about it.
Thank you so much, Antonella. Could we actually go back to your last slide just for a moment? I just wanted to use this to share a reflection. So the reflection is that if we think about these issues like protecting human rights in public procurement, ensuring fair labor compliance with fair labor standards, bans on child labor, ensuring payment of fair prices to developing country producers. These are all issues I would suggest. I say this to stimulate thought and would welcome any reactions or comments. These are all issues that are best pursued by countries working together. And it actually can be difficult, even prohibitively difficult, for countries to do these things all by themselves. Let me explain. If you're a country that historically has relied on child labor, and there are such countries, well, it might be too much to ask you to ban this aspect of production all by yourself, because then you may be concerned that other countries will keep using child labor and will use this as a source of commercial advantage. And that would be, you know, to me, is a reasonable thing to think about. And so my point is that it's going to be better for the world and better for all of us as citizens and better for all of our countries if we pursue these matters together. And that is kind of the segue that I'm going to use to go into the discussion of the WTO agreement on government procurement. That it simply is, it's better and less costly and less disruptive to individual economies if we implement sustainability together. And this is what we are starting to see done in this agreement that I've mentioned previously, the WTO agreement on government procurement. So in this last short segment, it's only 2 or 3 slides, I want to present to you what is going on in the context of the WTO GPA with regard to the issue of sustainability, and especially in this time of climate change crisis. Next slide, please. So the GPA, and I will make the long story short because we have another session coming up, the 4th session of this series, which will deal with trade agreements, including the GPA, but also regional and bilateral agreements. But to make a long story short, the GPA is the single most important agreement in the world governing trade and public procurement markets. And it's a fairly advanced agreement, but what I would point out here is already in the present GPA text, the present GPA text was adopted in 2012. I'll tell you a little bit more about this in our 4th session. But the present GPA text already refers to sustainability criteria and considerations at different places in the text. And so, for example, the use of technical specifications and tender documentation to support environmental protection values is explicitly encouraged and facilitated through the wording of Article 10 of the agreement regarding technical specifications. Also, the GPA, with respect to the issue of award criteria, please recall what Antonella mentioned, which I think is very, very important, that if we only focus on lowest price in our public award proceedings, our tender award proceedings, this is going to lead us in a bad direction. This will lead us to discount quality considerations and environmental and green procurement considerations and social sustainability considerations as well. So really, the modern supportable approach to public procurement emphasizes that price should never be the only consideration, or should only in rare circumstances should price be the only consideration. And rather, we need to think about quality variables. We need to think about sustainability. We need to think about life cycle cost, all of these things in awarding tenders. So I'm relieved to say that the GPA, the Agreement on Government Procurement, already accepts this and embraces this point of view and says that, well, you may use lowest price if you really wish, but you certainly do not have to do that. And, you know, the agreement welcomes the use of non-price criteria, which can include both quality and and environmental sustainability considerations. Excuse me for this. And environmental sustainability, the provisions of the agreement dealing with conditions for participation also can be used to advance environmental values. And the agreement contains explicit exceptions to support, for example, safety considerations, the protection of human and animal and plant life and health, and national security as well. So this agreement, so the point is that the GPA is a new generation trade agreement that embraces sustainability values in an important way, even though more can be done. Next slide, please. Okay, and so work is underway to further reinforce the role of the WTO Agreement on Government Procurement as a tool of sustainability. And in particular, there is a work program on sustainable public procurement, which was commenced in 2012, and it mandates the parties to the agreement and who work together in a committee, CGP means the Committee on Government Procurement, mandates them to identify best practices for sustainable development and procurement consistent with GPA requirements. This is an important opportunity and with a lot of potential to yield some interesting results. So I personally was still working in the WTO when we adopted and made the commitment to establish this work program. And I think it has a lot of potential, and I'm waiting to see where this work on sustainable procurement in the WTO will go in the next year or two. Okay, now it's true that the work on this work program has been on hold recently, but our understanding, Antonella's and mine, is that with the Biden administration and with the current leadership in the European Union, there's renewed momentum to make this GPA work program on sustainable procurement a success. So we can all stay tuned for some important further developments in this area. Next slide, please. Okay, so indeed, this slide just says what's next in the WTO. I think the stalled work program should be and is being reactivated. Further amendments could be adopted to the GPA to encourage and incentivize green public procurement and to build this into the market access aspects of the agreement, to promote dialogue and policy statements, to possibly go further also regarding the social dimension of sustainability. All of these things are possibilities. And we have to wait and see to an extent. Unfortunately, in Latin America, we don't have any countries that yet have become parties to the GPA, though Brazil is pursuing its accession to this agreement. And I hope and believe that when Brazil completes its accession, this will be a really important and interesting step forward for the GPA, and that other Latin American countries will come into the agreement at that stage. And again, the GPA, this is a wonderful thing. I mean, it used to be that in the WTO, you know, the emphasis was just on promoting trade. I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but this was kind of the way many people thought. Too much emphasis just on promoting trade, low prices, low costs, high volumes. Those things are all valid, but in the modern world, we need our trading system to support having a viable world in the long term. That's what sustainability is about. And it has the environmental dimension and it has the social dimension. Both are important, and we need our trading system to support those values. When I say that, I'm also, the Director General of the WTO says the very same thing. So I know I'm on solid ground. There's already been these efforts to make the GPA reflect sustainability considerations. And as I say, I believe more can and will be done in the future. Next slide, Antonella, and I think we're coming very close to the end. So this is just a simple slide to point you towards some additional resources if those are of interest. The first of these is an article, which I'm thrilled and proud to announce, has just been authored and published by Antonella and myself with our two other excellent colleagues and friends. One is Stephen Schooner, whom I mentioned previously, and one is Mark Steiner, who is based in Switzerland. And this is on the topic of deploying the WTO agreement on government procurement to enhance sustainability and accelerate climate change mitigation. So this is what I'm sharing with you now, is not just idle chatter. We are actively with our colleagues and friends, and we're really trying to encourage these developments in the WTO. And, I hope as time goes by, I hope that more and more countries in Latin America will be a part of this process. And do remember, you don't actually have to join the WTO to participate in these discussions. You can do so as an observer to the agreement. You don't need to join the GPA as a party, is what I meant to say. You can become an observer to the agreement and participate in the discussions. And also, as I say, what is going on in the WTO GPA is emblematic of developments in bilateral and regional agreements in which Latin American countries are already participating. And the second resource here on this page is an article by, again, one of our friends, Stephen Schooner, and his title says, "No Time to Waste, Embracing Sustainable Procurement to Mitigate the Accelerating Climate Crisis." So this is what we'll end by saying. We do have a climate change crisis in the world. I don't really think that can be disputed. Public procurement can play a really central role in helping all of our economies to adapt to the crisis. Then we also have the social dimension of sustainability. And, we want to have a good world to live in. Yes, it certainly demands environmental protection, but it also demands things like protection of human rights, gradually, I hope, eliminating reliance on child labor, gradually embracing more and more our commitments to the protection of human rights and social values. So, but my final comment, subject to Antonella, is this is all for discussion. And we won't forget about the points that have been made about environmental justice. And, it should not be up to poor countries to carry the main burdens in this area. The richer countries should take the lead, but we need to also involve, in the end, all countries. And so that the world will go forward together. So this is what I wanted to say. We welcome any further questions, and thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation Antonella, any final words?
No, gracias, Rob. Creo que resumiste súper
I think
bien o
that you
todos
have done a
los
marvelous
bastantes
summary,
puntos. Y como
Rob,
dijiste anteriormente,
as you said before.
esto realmente empieza con
This
los países más
starts
desarrollados.
with
Entonces hay un
developed
compromiso, yo
countries.
creo, de poder generar
There's a
esta
commitment
tecnología para que
of
esto pueda llegar
creating
también a los demás
technology
países,
so
a
that this
Latinoamérica,
can
y
be
también poder
transferred to Latin American
aprovechar estas
countries
tecnologías para poder
and to
crear
leverage these
compras
technologies
públicas
to
más eficientes,
create
no
sustainable
solamente al
public
sentido
procurement,
medioambiental, sino también
not from the
incluyendo la parte
environmental point
social.
of view, but also including social values.
Muchas gracias, Rob y
Thank
Antonella.
you, Rob and
¿Alguna
Antonella.
pregunta?
Is there any
Yo aprovecho para
question?
preguntarles si podríamos tener acceso al paper que acaban de presentar.
I think I
y
would
al
like
documento
to
del
have
profesor
access
Schooner,
to
si nos
the
podrán compartir
paper, your
todo el
presentation,
material.
and Professor Schooner's
Sí, creo
article.
que tiene que
Can we have
estar
access to that?
publicado, pero
Yes, I
tenemos
think
acceso
it's already
está
published,
en una página del GW y está listo.
Ok,
but
genial.
it's there in
Puede
a
hacerlo.
GW page.
Bueno,
Thank you.
me gustaría
But
saber si
but we
But-
can,
Perdón.
Veronica, if I may, we will pass to you the links at which these papers may be found, so that, and you can share those with the participants, share those on the INTAL website. I know you usually have a mention on the website after we do a presentation like this. So we will provide you with the links to those resources with great pleasure. And it's been an honor to be with you all for this program. And we have one more, don't forget, but maybe Veronica is going to mention that.
Bueno, el gusto ha sido nuestro.
So we have been very pleased and very honored